Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 28, my top 10 podcasts.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
To tide you over the seasonal period, and to avoid me having to book another guest in, I'm doing a very quick episode this week to tell you what my top 10 podcasts are. This doesn't really have an awful lot to do with self-publishing. However, I know that most people who will listen to podcasts are always looking for good shows to find and listen to. So I thought it might be helpful to give you my top 10. I've listened to about 50 or 60 shows since I've started listening to podcasts. An awful lot of them tend to die off after a while. And having hosted my own show, I know exactly how this can happen. The issue is that it actually takes quite a fair amount of work to produce a podcast every week. My excuse is when I don't feel like doing a podcast episode, I just do a shorter episode like this. Because I don't ever want to miss a week. I'd rather be slightly late and have a slightly shorter episode than just stop. There's been quite a few really good shows which have finished and just mid-episode. There's no season break or we're coming back after the new year. You just kind of stop. So I've excluded those from this list. I've also excluded self-publishing podcasts because I did a previous episode on that. I've tried to pick a mix of 10 of the best shows I listen to, of business and of non-business shows. I've always tended to use it as a way to learn about business and technology and other things. So here they are, in no particular order. The first show I want to mention is one called Internet Business Mastery. This show is a great introduction to online business. They take you through things like setting up an email list, how to get yourself built up on social media, how to sell your first product. It's a very good starter guide for internet business. The second show is Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Now this is clearly not a business show. In fact, this is very different from most other podcasts you'll listen to, as it's almost an audiobook. He generally does 2 or 3 hour long, very extremely well produced shows about a historical topic. And he has done series of these 2 or 3 hour shows. He did a particularly great one about the First World War, and also a really good one about Genghis Khan. The Genghis Khan one may be going off his feed soon. That's Wrath of the Khans. So you might want to start by downloading that. The way that he works is that after a few episodes, he files them away to an archive, and you have to pay to get those old episodes. They're fairly evergreen content, and they are literally like listening to an audiobook about history. But the newer episodes are always free on the iTunes feed, so it's well worth it listening to if you've got any interest in history. I wouldn't suggest it as a format for everybody in terms of podcasts, because they are quite a time commitment to listen to. However, they only come out every once a quarter or so it's not that much of a issue to listen to them now. The third show on my list is the Pro Blogger podcast. Again, this is another business show. It's hosted by Darren Rouse, who's a leading expert in the blogging field, who's now crept over to do a podcast about blogging. And I found this show just really tremendously practically useful. I've taken a lot of stuff away from it myself. So I think if you've got a blog or a podcast, then it's certainly worth listening to. Or even if you're considering starting a blog or a podcast, this is a great show to listen to. The next show is Happier with Gretchen Rubin. Again, this isn't really a business podcast. This is all about the tips and tricks that Gretchen Rubin, who's an expert on happiness, tells you about how to change your habits to improve your life. She's also got a very interesting way of splitting up people into 4 groups and oblige a questioner, a rebel and an upholder, depending on how you deal with internal and external motivation. I won't say too much more. You'll have to track down the episodes where she talks about that in her show, but it's generally quite a good show. The 5th show is P&R, This Old Marketing. P&R stands for Polizzi and Rose, who are 2 of the big people in content marketing. As they point out in their show, content marketing is a lot more than just start a blog or start a podcast. It's this whole idea of a brand producing content that brings in people into their business. The example they always give is Red Bull. Maybe a little bit advanced for those of you who aren't that interested in marketing, but if you are, it's certainly worth a great listen. The next show is Doctor Who Verity. Again, this isn't a business show. This is a show by a group of women who every week talk about Doctor Who, and they're usually extremely knowledgeable about the show and entertaining. They generally talk about old episodes between the seasons, and every time there is a Doctor Who episode on, they will talk about that episode in their show. The next show is the Social Media Marketing Podcast. This is run by the people who run Social Media Examiner, and is generally a great way to learn about social media marketing. Everything the Social Media Examiner do is really good and really high quality stuff. So if you're remotely interested in trying to market your book using social media, then I suggest you listen to this show. The next show after this is the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Again, this is not a business show. This is a group of scientists who debunk things like homeopathy and other pseudoscience, and also talk about the latest in scientific developments on their show. Like with most things in life, I'm not sure you necessarily want to agree with absolutely everything they say, but they generally seem to know more of what they're talking about than a lot of the other people online. Another non-business show I listen to, or at least listened to, it's on a season break at the moment, is Mystery Show. This is a well-produced show by Gimlet Media. Every week they investigate a real-life mystery, which is usually something trivial like somebody trying to return a video to a video store only to find out it didn't exist, or how tall is a particular celebrity. But it's extremely well produced and it's a great show, keep you entertained. My last show is another business show, the Web Search Social Podcast. This is a sort of show about business and marketing in general, and sort of talking about online business. Though often Caroline and Ralph Rivera seem to be more interested in the comedy side of things than the actual business side. Though most of what they actually discuss on the show is really useful from a business side as well. If you want a more light-hearted introduction to online business, you couldn't do much worse than start with this show. I think they're talking about rebranding it to give it a new name that's more appropriate. It might not be called the Web Search Social Podcast for much longer. However, that's my top 10 list for this year. Please let me know in the comments to this show at beginselfpublishing.com if there are any other shows that you like that I've not listed here. It may be that I just never listen to them. This is a trouble with podcasts. There's so many out there. Everybody can't listen to every show. So I'm always on the lookout for good shows myself. Hopefully I've helped you find some new shows as well. Please keep listening to my show though. Don't just go off and listen to these and never listen to mine again. Have a happy Christmas season, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.